People are not sitting at their desktop or laptops purchasing only anymore. Now we're seeing more and more people making purchases from their cell phones. So again, the smartphone is becoming really a computer and beginning to gain a share of market. And this is having a huge impact on how people sell real estate, how they market and sell real estate. I was talking to some of the folks at Bridgeland, and they were saying that, you know, young shoppers for homes have the Bridgeland blog on while they're driving around the community and looking at property. So they're comparing what they're seeing online to what they're seeing out their windshield. The next slide. The digital transformation is having an impact on office. This is a photograph of the Accenture's East Coast headquarters in Reston Town Center. And they have said basically for them to be effective, they have to, their workers are working in office, home, airport, airplanes, hotels, coffee shops, and even cars. I just hope the cars aren't moving while they're working in them. But the firms wishing to enhance their productivity must provide support for work in all of those environments. Accenture rented about 200,000 square feet in Reston Town Center 10 years ago. And when their lease came up for renewal, they had a clause that allowed them to expand into additional space at their call. They came back and said, well, we're very happy here, we've been very productive, our business is growing, and we want to take less space. And they want to take less space because their workers, they're high knowledge workers, highly skilled knowledge workers with a laptop and a smartphone do not come into the office as often. They're in their client's office or they're in one of these other locations. And so the actual space that Accenture uses, they're running a bigger volume of business than they were 10 years ago when they started. Their business is being run with less of a demand for office space. And as you've seen, and this is just people who are working here. But then if you looked at architectural firms have outsourced stuff to other countries, law firms have outsourced stuff to other countries. So it's a real challenge to say, you know, how is the work environment going to settle out for office? Now I think it's about 17% of the working population works once in a while from home. So that could be people who work every day from home or people who work Thursday, Friday from home, but it's 17% and growing. So it has an impact on what does the office environment mean, and some of it is the attitude of the way people work. So the next slide is from Corning. We have highly intelligent, creative knowledge workers who are trained to be skeptical and challenge the system. Such workers don't have much use for bosses. So those are the people you left at the office, I think, this group. But this is, I think it's a different way of working, and the mindset, I think, it hasn't played out what the impact is going to be for office. But it's definitely being used differently today than it was 10 years ago, and I don't think we quite know what the full impact of the digital transformation will be. Next slide. One of the other aspects that I think has been important, and I think is going to be more and more critical. When you look around the country, you see here in Houston the rail line between the medical center and downtown. But if you look at, say, Denver with Fast Track, and I don't know if it's how many billions, like $6 or $7 billion being spent to create a rail system in Denver. Portland, of course, has a rail system. Phoenix even has a rail system. The Phoenix rail system has actually exceeded its ridership forecasts, which is kind of interesting. It connects Tempe to Phoenix. Well, Tempe is Arizona State University, and downtown Phoenix has been enjoying a renovation and revitalization with nightclubs, restaurants, sports facilities, convention centers. And the way that they make ridership is on Friday and Saturday night. All the students from Tempe taking the trains into Phoenix. But the public-private partnership, working with public agencies, whether it's in infrastructure improvements or in finding a competitive position, I think is going to be critical. As many of you know, in the Woodlands, the waterway itself was part of a grant. There have been other grants for transportation that have been instrumental in achieving distinction and competitive advantages. And I think working with municipalities is going to be important. The next slide shows you for Bridgeland, a town center has been planned around the Grand Parkway. And it's a collaboration where Bridgeland is dedicating the land to the Grand Parkway. Bridgeland will have 4 interchanges, and it's already kind of laid out where its town center will be. Of course, it'll be like the Woodlands. It'll take a generation to build out. But that kind of collaboration is critical to really, I think, building the suburbs and having them reach their potential. It's very difficult to do all of it if you're going to reach and be a comprehensive and complete community without some element of public-private collaboration. Next slide. Foreign competition. This may seem strange to put on a slide about suburbia and what trends are going to have an impact on suburbia, but I think it's worth noting that we're a smaller country. You know, the book came out a few years ago, The World is Flat. This is quotes from, or statistics from, Rise of the Rest, the tallest building in the world for many years. It was, for generations, it was always an American skyscraper, whether it was the Empire State Building or the Sears Tower. Now it's a tower in Dubai. The wealthiest person, a Mexican. The largest publicly traded corporation, China, and you can read the list. That's having an impact on all of us. All of us have had our businesses impacted in one way or another by, whether you want to call it the shrinking of the world or just competitive distinctions. And I think it calls for even a community, a town, to think about how can it be attracting the best talent, how can it be, what is its competitive niche? I have what the next slide shows you one particular example, Des Moines, Iowa, which you'd say, well, okay, the upper Midwest is in free fall and decline, but Des Moines, Iowa is actually growing. It's growing in population, it's growing in employment. And jobs that would have been outsourced to other countries are actually going to Des Moines. It's found a niche. It's the #1 spot for insurance companies. Well, it's actually back office for insurance, but it has a quality of life. Kiplingers has rated it as one of the best cities in the country, and Forbes has said it's the 4th best place to do business. Now, you know, maybe many of you have been talking about Des Moines recently, but I doubt it. You know, you know, it's really one of those out of sight, out of mind places, but it has found a niche, and it owns that niche, and it's competing at an international level. And while it may sound, you know, and Houston obviously is competing on an international level, and this is an audience that fully appreciates that. But I think it has implications for the suburbs as well, and some thought to what is their position going to be, not just as we've always done in planning a master planning community. We've always looked at how we compete relative to Houston. But how do we now think about ourselves at a different level? And it's not something we're typically used to doing, and we certainly can't do it alone. It has to be done in the collaboration in a public-private collaboration. But you know, I think frankly, as trends for what are going to impact American suburbs in the next generation, I think foreign competition, the winners will be people who figure something out. Next slide. Sustainability and wellness. I think this is going to increase in significance. We're going to learn a lot about it. You know, there's just a lot going on that is interesting, and it's not coalescing yet around something that has a clear and distinct business model. I think there's still a lot of work, and I wouldn't want to say fumbling, but it's kind of reaching for the best solutions. But there are some metrics. You have a significant amount of people who are now or spending a significant amount of money being spent on products that have some form of a wellness halo, whether that's a Whole Foods grocery store or a yoga, you know, something that has wellness affiliated with it. And most consumers now, a majority of consumers, have been changing the way they think of wellness. Over 70% of U.S. companies are now focusing on wellness. And the reality is that our health system is spending a fortune, $2.5 trillion a year, and 75% of it is on acute care. What that means is we're spending the money after you got sick. So we're spending the money once you have diabetes, or once you have cancer, or once you have something. And the problem also is, once you have one illness, you tend to have 2 or 3 others. So it kind of snowballs. So a lot of people are focusing on how can we cut that expenditure off by having healthier lifestyles. And that's impacting companies, but it's also impacting individuals. The next slide. I took this from 2 sources. One is David Weekley Holmes, and the other is Robert Charles Lesser, RCLCO. But RCLCO is saying 21% of the people who are thinking about buying green, this is the primary reason for buying a home, a green home, and they're saying they will buy a green home if it saves them money, if it cuts their utility bills. 8.5% will say we'll give wellness and health as a reason for picking one house over another, greenhouse having less fumes and other things coming in and better insulation. And 6% will say environmental responsibility, and these tend to be more affluent buyers who would be in that 6%. Then if you look at the sequence of the ad, and it says, just look at the A, money saving for the 22%, then health promoting for the 8.5%, and then earth saving for the 6% reasons. They put them in the order of popularity of response. But it's still something that's evolving, and I think it's going to continue to evolve. But with the healthcare issues that we have as a country, and problems for businesses, problems for individuals, this will continue to have some influence. Again, I don't know what shape it will take, but I think sensitivity to how these trends are playing out is going to be fairly important. And it's one of the areas where the master plan communities have a distinct advantage, particularly the ones that have large amounts of open space, have medical facilities, and can really address already the desire to live in a healthier, more balanced environment. So the next slide. So suburbia transformed. We now have more hierarchies of place. We still have the single-family homes at the end of the cul-de-sac. They haven't gone away. They're still there. We still have the office buildings in the forest. They're still there. We still have the shopping center, the malls. They're still there. We now have a hierarchy of mixed-use, high-density places like City Center. And the suburbs that once were bedroom communities, that were basically people commuting and relying on the center city for the suburbs' existence, that's changed. And what's happened is the suburbs now are more and more self-reliant. I'd say they're probably more reliant on the airport than they are on the center cities. But their competitive advantage is going to be that they can provide a higher, healthier quality of life. Next slide. So those are my 6 projections or 6 forecasts. I'm not giving you, actually, I'm not even giving you forecasts. Actually, those are 6 factors that I think we'll have to weigh as we think about how do we develop how do we continue to evolve what we develop in suburban locations? How do we stay current with the next generation of suburbia? I think these are 6 factors. There are probably 6 others that I didn't cover, but I think these are 6 that are going to have a larger and larger impact on what we develop, how we develop, and where we develop. I appreciate having the chance to talk to you today. Thank you very much.